Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Citizens of the world, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of July 3rd, 2026. I'm Michael James. And our next guest, before I bring him up, I'd like to just let you all know that we could use your financial support. We do have ways that you can pay by scanning a code, both for Venmo, for Zelle, for a credit card. If you get a hold of us at livefromtheheartlandshow@gmail.com, I can send you that if you don't already have it. We do have to pay the engineer. We do have to pay Zoom. There are some other expenses, and we do appreciate you certainly listening in or viewing the show, however you may do it. We could also use some financial support. That said, let's bring on someone who's been printing. He never printed money, but he printed a lot of posters, a lot of flyers and all that. The one and only Chris Burke. Hello there, Chris.
Hey, Michael. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on to be part of what I hope will be a regular segment with aging activists regarding their experiences, their thoughts, and their suggestions on going forward. And you've been around a good amount of time. Our paths have crossed for many years. I've always liked running into you, and I'm glad you're coming on the show, although I think you were on once many years ago. People might find it. 1999,
I think.
Find it on YouTube if we were putting them up then. Anyhow, Chris, tell us how you got involved in what we call the movement, moving for social change, justice, etc.
Sure. I grew up in the northwest side, and this is the mid to late 60s. And it was impossible unless you're really, not paying attention. You're seeing civil rights marchers being sprayed or beaten. Totally, you're seeing guys carried to, on stretchers to helicopters in Vietnam. Probably one of the defining moments for me was guys I knew a couple of years ahead of me in high school had both, they were on the industrial track, so they were not going to go to college. Both enrolled in some buddy system, I think, in the Marines. And both of them, we had funerals for both of them, like within 6 months. And I remember riding our bikes to school and saying, I don't think, every day in the news you'd hear, we had 15 casualties, they had 450. And somebody said, I don't think they're telling us the truth about this. And so at any rate, things are turning in my mind, but went to the U of I in 68 and decided I wanted to get involved in the movement somehow. And I joined SDS, went to the meeting for, a few months, but it was really kind of frustrating to me. I was shy and, didn't really see any results happening. I mean, there were some demonstrations, yes. But at the same time, I saw in the underground newspaper that there was a print co-op being started. And I had actually worked a summer job at Stuart Warner running a small printing press the summer before. So I actually had some experience, unlike some of the people. And so I went to the organizational meeting. There's, some older guys and a couple of women. And so we started it, and it stayed kind of unchanged in a lot of ways. It was just pure work with democracy. We had one worker, one vote. So, it just proceeded that way. And we did some good things in Urbana. We were there about 3 years. And but by then the draft was ended and the student movement kind of took the air out of that. And so at that point, we looked around, decided to move, Chicago was probably the most likely place to be. We had a support system there. There were organizations like Rising Up Angry and things like that we thought we could help. And we looked around and nobody else, there was Omega Press, maybe Jackson Press, a couple of others, and left organizations some of them had their own presses, but they were 11 by 17 and we had a 17 by 22 press at that point. And so we moved up here in April, I think, of 73. And then a year or two later, we were on a 7th floor with a small elevator there. And at that point, we found 29-inch press that was on the west. Actually, it was around North and Halstead somewhere. The Red Star Press had abandoned it, basically, or gone under.
Oh yeah, Red Star Press. He moved back to Detroit, as I recall.
Right. Yeah.
And I think he's passed.
That's when we moved into Damon Avenue in the loft there, and with large elevator and things like that. And at that point, we could do a 29-inch posters and stuff, and it was great, And really, there wasn't anybody else in the city who could do that. So things went well there. Lester Doré came in, we brought him by one day, and he stayed as our artist for a few years. We eventually got to the point where, a pretty efficient production circle. People knew what their responsibilities were. We just have a quick meeting in the morning. Everybody signs off. And so we didn't need supervisors. And we did get to the point where we had a living wage, I would say. It never paid that great. But we had a lot of control over our working conditions. And, as I said, pretty much everybody signs off. That's as basic as it gets. And so we could do things like we brought in citrus solvents very early on. And also soy ink, recycled paper, things like that a normal business might not do right away because it wasn't cost efficient, but we went with that. And so things were, pretty well. At some point, we kind of also realized it was kind of basically we started out kind of a bunch of white guys kind of hanging out, taking apart machines and things like that. But we started involving people largely from the Latin American community in Chicago. And that, was a really pretty significant change in how things operated. So really by the end of by mid-90s, the majority of people there were Mexican, Colombian, Guatemalan. And so we, kept on going. We things went pretty well until 2008, of course. That was kind of a pretty big blow to everybody. We actually made it through. We transferred to digital printing, became a big thing by then. Probably got another, we got another 15 years out of it or so, 10, 15 years, but that was kind of the end of it. The pandemic basically put us out of business. But at that point, I was, 71. I was there for like 52 years. So,
wow.
A job for life. And my body had been breaking down by the time I was starting at about 65. And so I had to get shoulder replacement. I tore my sciatic nerve. And so it was good. I mean, I was ready to quit,
Let me ask you a couple of things, Chris. Was it a conscious decision to diversify ethnic or racial wise your workforce?
Definitely. Yeah, it widened our network of support and also the people we worked for, and very, very good experience.
One of the things that was a pretty wonderful experience, I ran into you a lot. I had stuff printed there. Later, I had my first photo books printed by you all. But one of the things that stands out was your parties. You had these dances on May Day, and sometimes you had them halfway through the year. Talk a little bit about the dances, because they were something that a lot of people who maybe never got any printing done did know about Salsedo Press.
Sure. Yeah, it was, I think we started out probably in maybe one of our first years, probably 74 February. We hadn't been paid in a long time. And, we had rent was due. And so it was basically a rent party. And it was nice because, there's a loft on the west side. There's nobody around you're going to bother. The floor is dirty anyway. It doesn't matter if you spill beer everywhere. And so that went well. And then I think we maybe had another one right after that when we had the benefit for the Swapo Print Shop project and for Gary Tyler. And so that was a success. And then I think right after the fall of Saigon, people wanted to have a party, and I think I volunteered Salcedo at a Rising Up Angry meeting. And so that kind of was the first one that was really tied to May Day, because that was like April 5th or something like that by then. And
I
so
remember, Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, we always pick a kind of try to be a benefit. In general, we're able to send $500 to $1,000 to different.
Tell our listeners who might be younger what SWAPO was or is, and Gary Tyler.
SWAPO was Southwest Africa political organization, and they were like in Namibia in exile fighting for South African liberation. And they were trying to set up a print shop in Lusaka, Gambia, Lusaka, wherever that is, I'm sorry. And so we actually were able to send them some money, and they did have it operating in the 80s. Gary Tyler had been a 16-year-old from Louisiana who had been convicted of murder, which, all white jury, and sentenced to death. And we were able to send him some money also, but he did not get out for 42 years. He's out now, and he's actually a noted fabric textile artist, and doing well, but 42 years later. So, but in general, there'd be things like a hurricane hit Cuba, or Mexico, or a print shop in Nicaragua. Nicaragua needs some support or things like that. So we take something every year to try to sponsor it.
I remember one of your parties when Katie Hogan, who was then my business partner in the Heartland and still a close friend, we're working on a book. Sometimes she comes on the show. She showed up with Ed Asner. That's who was in town for some socialist meeting or something.
Yeah, DSA Awards Dinner, I think. Yeah.
Let me ask you, what of all the things that came down in your lifetime beyond the print shop stands out the most in terms of your commitment to the movement, an event that you might want to share a little info on with people who might not know about it having happened?
Personally, I think the biggest one was kind of really in the first year I was at the print co-op. Fred Hampton was killed on December 5th. I've been there like 3 or 4 months, and somebody calls me up and get over here now to the dark room, and we actually put out a reprint of a Seed article the next day. But that was kind of like when you realize, these people are not playing around; they're playing for keeps, and it kind of just reaffirmed what I had unfortunately realized about the United States and repression that was going on, and it turned out to be much worse than I could imagine. Since then, it's you're talking about aging out. My body was pretty beat up. I needed a shoulder replacement. I tore my sciatic nerve, and so I've pretty much been concentrating on doing that. And another thing was kind of, after all this time doing left brain stuff, I felt like I ought to try right brain. So I've been kind of doing art posts and things like that, and just kind of studying art on my own, things like that.
Yeah, I see you put up paintings, the Monet, various people, pretty regularly. They're fun to look at.
Yeah,
and you ran a story too on one of the dances too. So, and that's what got me to say, I got to get him on the show.
Yeah, it's better than, I don't want to doom scroll first thing in the morning. I'd rather look at art for an hour or so before I get going. So, yeah.
What's going on how do you see the world now? What's going on, and do you have any opinions on whether it's various wars, whether it's elections? Because you're an astute political dude. You observe things. I'm sure after you look at art, you do the doom scroll. And what are you seeing? What are you thinking?
I kind of go back to I think 2010, 2011, we are the 99%, demos there in New York and all around the cities. I mean, that's kind of, it's elementary Marxism, you know what I mean? That, there's going to be a consolidation of very few people at the top. But what's interesting about that is it became kind of viral, and now so many Americans understand that would never have kind of gone along with it before. It's capitalism is fair or something like that. And so you've got a pretty, I think, fertile population who are going to accept critical ideas now. So that was a big difference, I think, over time. As far as strategy to what to do next, I'm kind of at a loss, to be honest. Who push the Democrats to the left? I mean, that's, they seem to be, kind of getting in the way, in a lot of cases of, some more substantial changes.
You got any recommendations, though, for people who are in the movement now or younger and into the movement, and how to sustain their commitment, even if they don't want to hear it from older people?
Not really. I just kept showing up. You know what I mean? That's all you can do. Demos are good, but I mean, I was fortunate to get into a situation where I was kind of doing left work a lot of the time and being paid for it. I mean, I don't think that's kind of likely to happen for many other people. I was, the right place at the right time.
What's your take on city politics? You got any view on it? Are you paying attention to that?
Somewhat. Brandon's been pretty good about some things. I wish his communication skills were better. It seems like sometimes things are just pretended, it's done deals and, with little or no feedback. And we'll see what happens there.
I think I got to say, I think he's gotten a lot better with when ICE came on the scene. I mean, his response to ICE was pretty good.
Yeah.
And I certainly hope that, I would like to get him reelected unless someone really outstanding shows up. So far, the announced candidates are not someone that's going to move me away from my support for him.
Yeah, really. You've got Vallis and, a few other people. Yeah.
Well, we got a number of minutes left, and I got to figure out how to get more information out of you. Do you have any stories you want to tell?
Going back to Stuart Warner, when I worked at summer jobs, but one time they put me next to an older black guy, probably about 50, and his name was, I think, Wallace Polk, Mr. Polk. And so I get in there and I'm kind of, 17 years old. I'm kind of like, okay, let's do this, let's do that. Kind of move it around. And I didn't realize they had kind of a piece rate established among the workers, not to go too fast. They want their jobs. They don't want to be exhausted every day. I'm 17. I don't care. And he kind of, whoa, Chris, you gotta slow down. And he said, the job was here before you got here. The job's going to be after you leave. And the guy after that too. He said, you're never going to finish the job. And kind of, you have to kind of go into it with that. That's kind of my, perspective really on my life as well. It's, I've done what I could. I feel good about that. I slept well, but I don't, it's somebody else is going to have to carry it from here on out.
Are there any younger print shops around town, people that are doing stuff? I know your equipment was getting sold off and went to various places. And do you know of any, and are you in touch with them?
The one, we had contact with Baseline Printing, who I think is in, kind of out sort of southwest, so near Bridgeport. I'd been injured recently, and I thought I would have liked to have done more to help them. But at that point, I'm pretty much thrown like most of the day. But I think they're still operating and, as far as I know, do pretty good work.
This is our 4th of July show. It goes up on WLUW on Saturday morning, the 4th. It goes up Friday on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Lumpen Radio. I'd like to take a moment and think it out. Your thoughts about our country, the United States of America, on the 4th of July at 2:50. What you like, what you don't like, those kind of things.
What I don't like is pretty much everything that's coming from this administration. I mean, it's pretty much they're in a position to rub people's faces in it, and people, the majority of people are opposed to all these initiatives they're doing, but they know they're on their last term here, and they don't care. It's whether that will, we're at the point of actually having to kind of depend on the Supreme Court, which is pretty much in their pocket at this point. So it's as bad as I've ever seen it. 60s were wild, people were being shot, things like that. but this one is kind of in a category of its own. And like I said, just the consolidation of wealth is kind of beyond our imagination. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on live from the Heartland, and I hope you're going to ride your bike today.
Yeah, I'm going to well, actually, it's a little late. I think I'll have to wait till 7 o'clock or so till it cools off.
You're riding your bike every day?
Yeah, pretty much. I've been getting out, like 7:30 or so lately. It's too hot, but yeah, it seems to be really good exercise for my back.
Okay, Chris, I want to thank you for coming on live from the Heartland. We don't live too far from each other, so I imagine I'll see you in the not too far off. You keep doing good in the world, because you've done a lot of good, and I'm glad you shared some of your experiences with us.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Good to see you.
Right on.
Take
Everybody else, let me share a few things as we close out. Last week, we had Flint Taylor from the People's Law Office come on the show, and he talked about, pardon me, his new book called The Conviction Machine. And it's a follow-up to The Torture Machine, which was about John Burge. And in here, he talks about prosecutors, lawyers, etc., as well as the Burge torture machine. It was a good interview. We had a few technical glitches, but I think Hal fixed those. And I recommend you go back, youtube.com/Heartland Media, or just the Live from the Heartland show on YouTube. 2 weeks ago, we had Jay Schaffner, Paul Friedman, and Carol Pittman come on with the book, Red Lives, Our Years in the U.S. Communist Party, Volume 1, Coming of Age in the Communist and Labor Movements. And, this was one branch of the movement of people who were active. And some of you may not